Indigenous religion in Africa, and I'm particularly talking about animism, is being eroded as new religions come in and begin converting the peoples of Africa. This conversion, particularly in the north, the greenish areas on my map, would be Islam. In the south, it would largely be Christianity. I would like you, however, to understand that although these new religions come in, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be lost from the past. There are accommodations that are made by both the new ideas and beliefs and the old ideas and beliefs. And what tends to happen is that the old indigenous belief systems become a foundation for, or a platform for, the new faiths that become an overlay on top of them. This is something I'm going to be stressing again when we get to the New World, but it also appears in Africa. Okay. As we take a look at the image on the right, this would be an example of accommodation. This is a depiction created, bronze piece, in Africa by an African artist, 18th or 19th century. It is the crucified Christ, and it follows some of the traditional patterns that we might find in European or perhaps in American depictions of the crucified image of Jesus. At the same time, however, the figure, very, very powerful and very expressive, clearly has African features and is much more abstract than I think we would find in Western images. The kilt that he is wearing, the loincloth that he's wearing, is also covered with a traditional African design, which we could find on fabric. And in fact, we will see, I think, again, repeated very shortly. We're looking right now at one of O'Reilly's pieces, figure 7.6. It is the Gospel of St. Luke, and it is from the Ethiopian church. The Ethiopians received missionaries from Egypt and Syria, and these folks brought Christianity to Ethiopia. It is something of a unique division within the Christian sect or foundation of beliefs. It is also going to become uniquely African. This is the frontispiece to the book of Luke, and that would be one of the 4 chapters of the New Testament, the good news, essentially, the Gospels. This is a 17th century gospel book. In Ethiopia, there were no gospel manuscripts, let me say, before the 14th century. So this is a relatively new appearance, coming in with Western influence and introducing writing and introducing essentially literacy. The image that we are looking at shows us St. Luke and 2 of his disciples. The page next to him is as decorative as the garments and the background that surrounds St. Luke. All of these are drawn from traditional fabric designs in Africa. The love of pattern, the love of colors, and if you take a look in the center of the cross image on that page, there is an X, and that is the same symbolic imagery that we just saw. Let's go back a sec. On the design of the loincloth that Jesus is wearing hanging from the cross. These are drawn from these images, these symbols, very rich symbolic vocabulary found in abstract depictions, forms, shapes, are fairly universal in Africa. They are continued, picked up, and converted into Christian images. Let's take a closer look at St. Luke. Okay, this is our depiction of St. Luke, one of the great evangelists, with his 2 disciples from the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, slightly variation on other forms of Christianity. It traces its roots back to around the 1st century. St. Luke is in a pose of prayer. You might not recognize it, but this is a pose of prayer, both hands up, that harkens back to the catacombs. We can find it there. It's essentially a praise gesture, but it is also a prayer gesture. St. Luke faces us formally and frontally, and I love it. He's surrounded by two local birds. They are two hornbills, Abyssinian ground hornbills, that decorate the composition. We would not, again, expect to find that in a Western manuscript. The figure of St. Luke, also the face that he has as well as his disciples or his followers, are very, very mask-like and flat. Drawn, I think, from the influence of looking at carved African masks and carved African art. The rich colors and the fabric designs that they are sporting also come out of African textile designs, which convey patterns that are associated with ethnic groups, that convey status, rank, and also convey moral codes and ideas, much as Proverbs would do. One of the patterns on the garment, the front section of St. Luke, in fact, is the same that we could find on a Dogon Kanaga mask. It is in the center panel and is depicted in red. Looks like an hourglass or two triangles going tip to tip. I am not certain that I can tell you what this symbol means in either of these pieces. I have interpreted it on the Kanaga mask, the Dogon mask, as an image of transformation, change and passage, and in fact that may indeed be its meaning. It may also have a richer meaning when it transfers over to the Christian image, referencing courage also and the crossing of paths. Whatever the meaning of this symbol, it is a traditional African symbol with varied meanings over the continent, and it shows us a very, very strong continuation and connection with visual imagery in Africa. Another view of St. Luke, I'd also like to show you on the right, another page from the same manuscript, incredibly vividly colored. These two, I'm going to say rather animated writers as they look at each other and seem to be gesturing to each other, represent John and Luke writing their Gospels. They too are wearing elaborate patterns, and we are seeing zigzag patterns around the edges, and vine-shaped intertwined forms that create a kind of border for the entire page, which is typical of Ethiopian manuscript designs. Zigzag shapes traditionally, and I can't tell you if it applies here, but traditionally have referenced the path of ancestors and remind us that life is filled with twists and turns, and that we must carefully make the correct choices along the way, and that traditionally we could count on our ancestors to help to guide us in this way. Okay, I can't tell you this is a Christian manuscript from the 17th century. I can't tell you if the same meaning applies, but I can tell you that these geometric shapes and forms are traditional, are used throughout the continent, and certainly, yes, with various meanings, but that they maintain ancient and persistent traditions. One last thing is that Ethiopia has asked for the return of this manuscript, and my note below actually says of its manuscript. It was acquired by the British Museum Library in 1868. It was legally acquired. So what this represents then is another example of the issue of repatriation. It was purchased by the British Museum Library from the Secretary of State of India. How the Indians acquired it, I am not certain. But I do know that it is currently held legally in England. Nevertheless, Ethiopia has requested its return, and it represents again one of the issues that is associated with repatriation. I'd like to take us now to Islam, which is a very powerful and important religion in Africa today. It spread largely in a peaceful way through West Africa along the caravan routes. The caravan routes were originally in territory along the northern portions of Africa, and this portion of land very early on was conquered by the caliphs, the caliphates, And through the spread of goods, traders also spread ideas. In particular, they spread Islam. And there rose up a couple, not just a couple, many, but two noteworthy, Timbuktu and Janet, centers of Islamic learning. These centers of Islamic learning, located in the southern part of West Africa, in this region right down here. These centers of learning produced manuscripts and helped to maintain and promote the spread of Islam. Okay, this is just another set of maps to give you the division. In the north, Islam, in the south, Christianity. It's almost like there is a division between them, but I would in fact like you to know that Islam is not limited to the north, and Islamic practitioners exist in the south, just as Christians and animists exist in the territory of Islam. So it isn't a perfect division. This is a depiction that Mr. O'Reilly has given us, a pretty famous mosque located in the southwestern region of West Africa, located in Mali. In our book, it's 725. It is rather extraordinary because it is a mud mosque. It has been built out of the local soil. It is in use today. It was originally built in the 14th century. However, because of its fragile materials, it was rebuilt in the early 20th century. O'Reilly's using the date 1906, 1907. Regardless of that, it is replastered annually in order to renew and protect it. It is an object, a Muslim object, but it has been rephrased in terms of local people, their belief, their traditions, and also certainly their culture, beginning with the material that is being used, mud, to create the structure of the mosque. Certainly in no other place in the world can I say, aha, we have a mud mosque. This is mud brick. It works beautifully here. There are a few trees. So what you want to do is use local, inexpensive material. It is also hot in this region, and mud structures tend to insulate and give you a cooler interior. Consequently, you're going to see very few openings. So unlike the Turkish mosques, for example, the Ottoman mosques that we looked at with 999 windows, you aren't going to be able to find those openings here. Instead, this is appropriate to the environment in West Africa. This is an overview because I would like you to know that despite the fact that this has been morphed into something that is locally reflective and suitable, with a true synthesis of ideas, the mud mosque at the same time does have all of the features that we would expect a traditional mosque to have. And that includes a courtyard, which is located right over here. And that is the open region that you could enter, and it would allow you to pass from secular to sacred space and give you a sense of a protected interior visit. It also has the Qibla wall, which faces Mecca, located directly over here. And on the interior, I am sorry I can't show you a depiction because I don't have an inside shot. On the inside, there is also a mihrab marking the exact location of prayer. So it has all of the necessary aspects that would be a part of a mosque. And that does include the minarets. That's what these things are on the top of these buttressing projections. In addition to that, speaking of buttresses, the construction of this mosque evokes ancestor tradition in the region. It was a traditional practice for the sons to bury their fathers within family compounds and to mark the burial site with pillars. These kind of rounded or conical earthen pillars became a traditional symbol of ancestors, of the elders, and of the wisdom and power and the support of the deceased members of your family or of the ancestors. They are now being incorporated into the walls of the mosque, and pretty much all the way around all of these pillars, which are referencing the traditional shapes that would be used to mark the burial plots of ancestors. And that would be also true for the Qibla wall of our mosque. These indigenous traditions and references enrich the mosque and bring new meaning and represent assimilation of two systems of belief. These ancestral pillars are associated now today with the wisdom of Islam, and they're transformed into buttresses that help to support the building, to support also the beliefs and the people and the promises for the future and salvation through Islam. Another view you can get, perhaps the one lower right is the one of the entrances for this structure. The one on the left, upper left, gives you a little bit better sense of the conical divisions that help to support the exterior of this building. The folks at Genet give us also a performance art in part that helps to again reflect the blending of traditions. Once a year it is really necessary to replaster the exterior of these mud mosques, and that's what you're looking at in my slide right now. Males from the community use supports that project from the surface of the walls. They hang on and they put on a fresh coating of mud so that the surfaces of this building tend to be fluid, round, flowing, and very organic in nature. The process of doing this takes place every spring, and I'd like to strongly suggest that this coincides with festivals that also have traditionally been undertaken in the springtime. These are annual festivals for sowing crops, festivals that are associated with fertility and with ideas of rebirth and renewal. So again, I think we are blending traditions in the mud mosque. Perhaps this is the best example of the blending of traditions that I can give you, however, and it is the inclusion of ostrich eggs on the tops of the minarets. If you go right here, and I'm hoping that my marker is working, over here and here and here, you're going to see on the minarets something really rather extraordinary. These are huge ostrich eggs. You're not going to find these on Islamic mosques anyplace else in the world. In the region, however, they reference purity, and they certainly also represent fertility, which would imply abundance and prosperity and new life, rebirth and renewal as well. It is definitely a blending of Islam with local beliefs and local traditions. That is also going to apply to the design of some of these mud mosques. The one in the middle, I believe, is Genet, and the one to the far left is another. Both of them draw very heavily on the designs of art from the region in West Africa, in Mali. The mask, the headdress mask that I have on the right is a Dogon mask. It has very strong indentations that follow very striking vertical lines. It is a monkey mask, and the abstract depiction on the face of the mask, I think those design patterns are carried over into the exterior designs that we see in the entranceways to Muslim Islamic mosques, places of prayer that are so important to the life of Islam in West Africa. There is then the ability for Islam and animism and tradition to coexist and certainly to assimilate. As one comes, it comes and rebuilds with the native faiths and ideas that are already present. This is equally going to be true for the New World when we look in our last week at Mesoamerica.